What's up, guys? CJ here.
And this is Nick.
And welcome to Hybrid Network's review of Iron Fist Season 1, a show that I've been personally waiting for a really long time, and I've actually been more anxiously awaiting it now that the reviews have kind of started to drop, and we finally got our eyes on it. Today, Nick, I know we've both been up since 3 a.m., so this is our 3 a.m. Eastern Time. You've been up since midnight Pacific Time, so this is going to be a little scatterbrained, so bear with us. Highly caffeinated, but even that can only go so far. So Iron Fist, Nick, kind of what were your initial thoughts on the show, especially going into it with all the negative reviews?
Yeah, so I was never like super pumped up for the show. I was looking forward to it though because I liked Luke Cage and I didn't really like Jessica Jones, but I thought that this one would be cool because the whole kung fu aspect to it and like the character has some like neat power sets. But yeah, the whole reviews controversy hit, and my opinion kind of was like getting more worried about the show, like especially having to stay up for like 13 hours watching it, like, oh, this show's not good. But then as I saw the show, I was like, wow, this is, a pleasant surprise. I actually did enjoy it a lot. So
it's really, I think, I don't know where the disconnect really is, with reviewers and fans. I don't know exactly what reviewers were looking for in this show. I'm honestly really thankful that the reviews were so negative, because I honestly was really struggling to find positive reviews, and I didn't read that many because I didn't want to spoil the show, because I really wanted to go in with a fresh set of eyes. But I really was shocked because I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, and that's coming from a big Iron Fist fan. I was ready to be disappointed, I was ready to be let down, and in the end it impressed me. It's not a perfect show by any stretch of the imagination, but it is, in my opinion, better than the reviews make it out to be. And we're not going to talk about any of the controversy. That's another topic for another time. Maybe we'll
I think there's a whole discussion podcast coming out about that.
We got a discussion coming up. I was going to say, if it's not the discussion, then we could talk about it on next week's Marvelite, and who knows, it might get mentioned. But that's a whole nother topic for another time. Ultimately, so this season of Iron Fist revolves around Danny Rand. He's the heir to Rand Corporation, along with his childhood friends Joy and Ward Meacham. Their fathers set up this company, and after a tragic plane crash that killed both of his parents, Danny Rand has been training in the mountains of, in the Himalayas actually, at this mystical temple named Kunlun, which only appears on Earth once every 15 years, give or take, as Danny says in the show. And so when the show begins, he's come back to New York to basically try and jumpstart the life that he once had, the life that he lost in that plane crash. And there's, a huge part of this show is fitting in, at least in the early going, is Danny trying to fit in and everything like that, but it quickly develops from there. So Nick, what were some of the things that really stood out to you about the show that you really enjoyed?
I think just the way like the story progresses, it's really interesting, seeing the whole aspect of him trying to put his life back together. And also, something that I noticed too about just the show generally is how it had a lot of parallels to the Moon Knight character, actually, for me, which is kind of interesting. Really? Because it was almost like a different take on Iron Fist. Like, he's kind of like psychologically damaged, and he's having like all these weird visions and like flashbacks of like him training and stuff, and like nobody believes who he is and stuff. It really reminded me a lot of Moon Knight, actually. That was like kind of surprising, but
especially in the beginning. I mean, if you watch the trailer, you see there's some scenes of him in a psychiatric hospital chained to a bed, and that's a huge thing in the early going of the show. It comes up a couple times over the course of the season, but that's you're right. I hadn't even really thought about that. It really is a very different, kind of almost emotionally damaged, disturbed take on the character. I will say another thing that I like as to a more traditional take on the character is that they brought so much of the character's history into the show. I honestly was not expecting it to be so 100% accurate, because I mean, you look at Daredevil and you're thinking, it's like, oh, Frank Miller, you've got that backstory is pretty easy to translate to Netflix, and they did a really great job of it. Jessica Jones, maybe a little bit harder, but they did a good job of translating that too, especially drawing heavily from Alias. Luke Cage, another one that's a little bit harder to translate, but they did a good job of it. But Iron Fist is a different beast in and of itself. You got to explain basically this guy that was trapped in this mystical city that only appears on Earth once every 15 years, who learned Kung Fu and has a magic chi-powered fist. It's like, how do you explain that? and all these kind of crazy, kooky characters that come from his world, and the show does an incredible job of it. I mean, I was 100% stunned that they brought in as much as they did. From, you know, they mentioned the UT, the August personage in Jade, I think is the correct title. Lei Kung the Thunderer, the dragon. God, I'm basically.
Yeah, they even had the dragon in there, a little teaser for like a cameo thing.
A little teaser for the dragon. They do. This is a little bit of a spoiler, so maybe just hit the pause button right now and skip ahead a few seconds. But they do set up Davos, the Steel Serpent, a little bit towards the back half of the season. But overall, I was just really stunned and very, very pleased as an Iron Fist fan that so much of the characters that I know and love from the comics made it into the show. Xiao Lao, the dragon, the Undying. I was completely blanking on that name for a second because I'm so tired. But the show was not perfect. Nick, what were some of the things that you really what stood out to you as some of the negatives?
I think that I was hoping that we would get to see him use like his powers a little bit more varied choreography in the fights, or like just different fights in general, because there's a moment later, like I think it's in the final episode, where you get to see a little bit of the true power that he has, where he like kind of does that ground slam thing, and it like pretty much destroys the whole floor. That was awesome to see. But which
you saw in the trailer as well. So hopefully people don't jump down our throats for that. It's not really a spoiler if you saw the trailer.
Also, but I was hoping to see I mentioned this. I was talking to the guys, but mentioned how I was hoping to see a little bit more of Kunlun, like maybe a flashback to like him actually in the monastery or whatever it is. But
so we do get some glimpses at the monastery. Mostly though, you can tell it's something that they really didn't want to get into, and maybe I don't want to give anything away about how the season ended. Maybe it's something that we'll get in season 2, or even potentially the Defenders, but that might be another video for another time. I agree with you on the powers. I did want to see more of that, because it is mostly just like run-of-the-mill kung fu, which I say like I can do anything like that, but no, it is mostly just regular old hand-to-hand fighting with the occasional Iron Fist usage, and I definitely wish we got to see more of that. Especially, there's a point at which you get to see some historical footage of not an ancient Iron Fist, but one of his predecessors who is absolutely kicking ass and kind of showing off the full range of the powers. Which is one of my favorite Easter eggs in this show. But really though, my biggest issue was I think the dialogue was a little rough. It felt a little, I don't know if it was an issue with the writing, but it felt a little rougher to me. It kind of felt like more than any other show, this one really struggled with, because it's okay for Danny to talk differently than everyone else. Of course, he's not gonna, be speaking like colloquially. He's not gonna be using slang or anything like that. But it seems like everyone started to enunciate a little bit better and a little beyond, and that's just a nitpicky thing, but beyond that, you can tell a lot of the dialogue just feels clunky and a little bit awkward. But that's one of my real big, because it kind of can take you out of some scenes at a certain point. But overall, Nick, kind of looking back on this first season of Iron Fist and looking forward to the Defenders, what kind of rating would you give this show out of 10?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while now, trying to process the whole show. I think ultimately...
You finished before me. You've had some time to think.
Yeah, ultimately I think I'm going to be at about an 8 out of 10. I think so.
That's a little more generous than me, honestly. I'm at a 7.5, and that's really, not too much below you. I think I was thinking 8 as well. And I really enjoyed it. I did. I absolutely did as an Iron Fist fan. I think some of the issues in dialogue and some things in the pacing, although honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, I feel like this show is honestly paced a little bit better than the other Netflix series. It didn't quite feel like it had a little lull. Everybody talks about that Netflix sag, like you hit episode 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, and then you just have this random subplot to fill. It didn't feel like this show had that. But maybe that kind of led to some of the more hurriedly tying up loose ends. Or frantically kind of, although even then, like I say that honestly, I don't think it was that frantic in the final episode tying it, because by the time we get to the last episode, there's really just one thing happening.
Yeah, it's not like you have 4 things going on at the same time.
It really feels like they kind of learned from their mistakes there, so I give it a 7.5. If you're a fan of the character, check it out. I think anybody that's worried about checking it out because of the negative reviews, I would say give it a chance. Give it a chance, make a decision, watch more than one episode. I think that's the trap that people are falling into, is they're watching the first episode and then they're just not watching anymore. But I definitely say give it a chance. Nick, any final thoughts on the show?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that like I mentioned, it is a different take from what I've seen of Iron Fist comics on the character a little bit. There's some more... It is a little bit of a slow burn in the beginning, but I think it definitely picks up and pays off later on throughout the show. And I can't wait to see more of Danny in the universe. So,
absolutely. A lot of the reviews said episode 6 is when it really starts to take off. I really felt it began at episode 4, but episode 6 is hands down probably my favorite.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Of the series, with a bunch of classic villains thrown in there. No spoilers, but it's something to look forward to if you haven't watched it yet. But alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for our review for Iron Fist Season 1. Thanks so much for watching. Let us know if you've already gone ahead and binge watched it, what you thought of the first season in the comment section down below, and what grade you'd give it out of 10. But that's going to do it for us here. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to smash that like if you like what you saw, and subscribe for more great content every single day. Signing off, this is CJ.
And this is Nick.
And we'll see you next season, I guess.
Yeah.
The Defenders coming later this summer.